you doing, baby? We destroy arguments and every opinion raised against the knowledge of God and take every thought captive to obey Christ.
Hello?
What's up?
Hey, man. I have one question before we start this, though. In your bio, it says objectively proving Christianity.
Correct.
How can you objectively prove an ideal?
What do you mean an ideal? God is not an ideal
I said
God.
Christianity, not God. How do you prove Christianity, the ideal we're talking about, as objective?
Oh, we prove the Christian worldview.
So your ideal, what I was talking about, Christianity, how do you make that objective in your view?
What do you mean by ideal?
Christianity, I'm going to call Christianity an ideal because that's what it is.
No, I argue Christianity is like a model of reality. So humans understand the world. We understand our experience through like a narrative or like a story. And the story in the Bible is the necessary and sufficient story to account for our intelligible experience. And if you deny that, you wouldn't be able to make sense of the world.
So like memory, what you're saying.
Memory? No.
Like a good story that we have to remember.
I'm saying that the claims in the Bible, like the ontological, epistemic, and ethical claims, constitute a worldview that's necessary to make sense of our reality.
So you're going to call your ideal a presupposition. That's fine. But how do you make Christianity ideal in your view?
What the hell are you talking about, dude?
I just said, how do you make Christianity objective in your view? How does that happen?
Well, I have an objective proof that Christianity is true. It's the transcendental argument of God.
Explain it.
That if all we had was human reason and our observations of the world, then science and philosophy would be impossible.
Do you know what secular humanism is?
Yeah. So God's revelation is a necessity to make science and philosophy possible. So to deny the Bible.
Yeah, but where did you observe this God? Because you're saying it's a necessity.
Did I observe?
If it's a necessity, then you know it, right?
Well, I'm saying like if all we had to rely on was our observations and reason, you wouldn't be able to make sense of the world. Science would be impossible.
Why not?
Because
it is.
To even observe the world, things have to be true, like cause and effect, or identity over time, or unity of nature. All those have to be true for you to even look at the world.
Yeah, I assume they are.
So the only thing that can justify those things is God's revelation, since our observation and our reason can't justify that those things are true. And they're necessarily true for you to have an observation at all.
So we have to trust our observation in the same way we trust the God?
We observe something in the world, right? And so we ask the question, what is necessarily true for you to observe something in the world? So cause and effect has to be true to observe something in the world, right?
Yeah.
It has to be true prior to your observation because it's a necessary precondition to observations. Now, that means we can't use observations to prove cause and effect. And so the only way we can prove cause and effect is with God's revelation.
So something outside the universe explains cause and effect. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, only God's revelation can explain cause and effect or uniformity of nature or identity over time.
God's revelation as in something outside the universe that is unobservable, right?
God's revelation is not outside the God.
Can you observe it in where we live? Like anywhere at all? We could be on Mars right now. Can you observe God?
Well, no, we have tangible things like the Bible is tangible, right? Or the
Is
history.
that an observation of God, or is that a subjective to humans?
It's tangible. It's a tangible evidence of God. It's God's revelation.
So the Bible.
The history of the church is a type of revelation because God's will is revealed.
So the Bible was actually a compilation of allegories. I'm a Calvinist myself, so I research a lot of the scripture, and I find that a lot of the time it's just allegorical.
Why are you debating with me? You trolling me?
Because you're saying God exists, but it's an idea. It's just an idea. You're trying to give an argument where it's outside the observable universe, and now it's unfalsifiable. If you can't observe it, then you don't know it. You don't know God.
So,
What I said was you can't refute. You don't know God. You can't refute that because you don't observe it.
you subscribe to the falsifiability criteria.
What does that even mean? I don't subscribe to anything.
Well, you're just.
I'm just saying that you're bringing up ideas. Like God is a cool idea. If you think it's outside the universe, you have to observe it first.
How old are you?
I'm 18, man. I turned 18 on the 30th.
Oh yeah, you just don't know.
I turned 18 last month on the 30th. So can we continue this conversation, or we can talk about us?
You don't really know what you're talking about. You're kind of like too low.
You're just bringing up ideas, though. How do I not know what I'm talking about when you don't either?
You're too low tier.
You don't know God, though. You don't know what you're talking about.
You have to read more books and learn things.
Like what book?
You're really young.
What book in the Bible shows God? What book in the Bible?
So you're ignorant and arrogant.
I'm not arrogant. I just want to know your answer because you obviously know this thing, right? You know God, right?
Romans 9.
Do you know God?
Romans 1.
Do you only think of God or do you know him?
You know him.
How do you know him? Where did you know him from?
You have a personal relationship with him. You should know.
Did you think about him in that time or did you know him from somewhere?
Are you really a Calvinist?
Yeah, I'm a Calvinist. I don't believe in free will. I believe that we live in a deterministic world. I believe that God is something outside the universe and it's an ideal. I like the ideal of God, but I think that it's nothing.
I don't even understand why you want to argue.
No, because we have two different positions on the same thing. You think that God is something more than an ideal, and I don't.
You're a little kid who doesn't know what he's talking about.
I turned 18 like 5 days ago, man. We can talk. You can speak to me. I don't know what's the problem. I'm just saying we hold.
You have to read books, dude.
Oh, hey, how's it going, man?
I'm going well.
I wanted to ask you, what's your main presupposition? I'm trying to find an opening statement that I can use in my discussion of God because I'm certain from my own personal experience that God exists, but what's the presupposition that all theists, do you believe, what should be our first opening statement about God, the first presupposition?
I'm not really sure what you're saying. I'm not really sure what you're asking.
Yeah, in other words, when we start to debate with anyone who doubts the existence of God or questions various forms of faith, what should be our opening statement about? Okay, God is what? What should we be? What should we say?
God is what? Well, I don't know. I think we should have to push the idea that they're not neutral, because these people think they're open-minded and neutral, but really they're in rebellion and they hate God.
Yeah, I take that for granted, but I need I'm looking for a solid set. Like for instance, right now I'm using God as first cause, and then from first cause they have to deny that there's a first cause for every effect that we're observing that science is validating or whatever, but tracing it all the way back to its first cause.
So I make a transcendental argument for God. Actually, I have a picture of the book that I read.
Okay.
Where am I arguing from?
Okay, so it's a transcendental argument for God then?
Yeah, here's the book. You can't really, it's kind of cut off by the top of the screen. But it's called The Objective Proof for Christianity. And it's maybe 300 pages. I'm not sure, around there.
Okay.
But
okay.
It's a lock. It's just the most nuclear strength argument. The atheists don't know how to handle the argument. And if you read that book and learn that argument, you will.
I will add that. I'm surprised I don't have that in my library. I have hundreds of books. I
It's
do
a
not
newer
have this
book.
one.
I think
Yeah.
it came out pretty recently. Actually, the guy that put the book together is Joshua Pillows, and he goes live on TikTok sometimes.
Okay. Cool. I
Yeah,
appreciate it.
it's a
Yeah, the
great.
objective proof of God. Because if nothing else, too, it might be awesome if you would include speaking from that book, reading from the book, explaining the parts of the book to teach theists how to defend and establish the existence of God, you
Mhm.
know? Because we can't just go on what the pastor said or oh my church says this.
Yeah.
We need strong statements.
There's a paper online you could look at for free. Um, the paper's title is the contingency of knowledge and revelatory theism.
The contingency of knowledge and revelatory theism. Okay.
If you do a Google search for the contingency of knowledge and revelatory theism,
Okay.
paper by a guy named Mannion, Russ Mannion, it should come up. And that paper basically contains the argument.
Okay.
But the book will flesh it out more if you want to get really in depth into it. That paper, might have to read it a couple times. It's kind of philosophical, but
That's fine.
it's a strong argument. So there's problems with the other arguments for God. Is there's going to be like logical flaws, and the atheist will always be able to dance around the evidence. And so
Right.
this argument goes straight to the heart of the matter, where we actually disagree and like our biases, and
Right.
it addresses that because they interpret evidence. So they just automatically dismiss any supernatural claim before they even look at the evidence, right?
Exactly. It's an unsubstantiated belief in the lack of evidence. They don't actually present a refutation or a rebuttal. It's just a belief in the lack of evidence.
We disagree about how to interpret and evaluate evidence in a fundamental
Right.
way. So, like, let's say I convinced a guy who had a naturalism worldview or perspective, which just means they don't believe in any supernatural or whatever. And I go, look, the historical facts of the resurrection, Jesus clearly resurrected, right?
Right.
Well, maybe they believe me, maybe they accept the evidence. But because they're a naturalist, they'll say, well, there's a natural explanation. He maybe
He
just
passed out. He was in a coma.
yeah, he was in a coma. Maybe there's grave robbers, a conspiracy, whatever.
Right.
They can always come up with any excuse. There's always for any phenomena. There's always like a million things you could say like cause the phenomena, and it's a matter of like determining how we interpret the phenomena. What does it mean? So
And as you say, and as a Christ follower, we know that the real evidence is meeting with Christ himself in real time. Here in 2024, we have met Christ. We are encountering and interacting with Christ. That's the key to it, because if Jesus is not alive right now, then the entire thing is fake. So he has to be alive right now. And that's the key to this. So you're right. It's got to be a personal relationship.
it's all about how you look at the world, right? Like when we look at the world, we see evidence for God everywhere. The beauty of the sunset or whatever, right? They look at the world and they say, "Oh my gosh, an animal is suffering in somewhere in the forest. What a horrible world!" So
Yeah, well,
there
of
must
course,
not be
there's
a
no
God.
accounting. Well, that's when I drag them back to evolution. I said, okay, really, we're looking at a process of evolution because the processes of nature, the cause and effects of nature, were in motion. If there is no God and humanity has no effect, then guess what? Then it's evolution. You have to look at evolution as being the cruelty, the survival of the fittest, and natural selection are in motion. I don't mind dragging an atheist right back to evolution, just to make them eat it.
It leads to kind of an absurdity where everything just evolved to be that way. So it's like not necessarily wrong that you're like, I don't know, a serial unaliver because you just evolved to be that way or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's insane. It's insanity, man. But I mean, you're doing good, and you always hold your own. Young people, though, I mean, myself, I'm 65, but young people, you should really encourage, especially if they just turned 18, they're just entering the real world. You know, you might need to hold their hand. You might need to be a little more patient and say, look, okay, you're very young. Obviously, he hasn't had an opportunity to read
Well, the
like as he
problem
should,
is
you know?
people are really young and you just got out of like school, you
Right.
graduated, and you've learned all these new things, and you're kind of like puffed up, as Paul says, and you're a little prideful
Yeah.
and arrogant, and it's kind of like
Right.
impossible to teach someone who's arrogant. That's
Some
why
of them, yeah, but it's natural. We were all there.
Yeah.
You know, I remember when I
Of
was
course.
18, you couldn't tell me I wasn't grown up. It wasn't until I got older that I realized, oh my God, 18.
Of course. I mean,
So
I was trying to be patient with him, but he was just kind of acting immature, and so I was like, "This is not going to be like edifying if we're going to go around in circles here." So
That's true. That's true. That's true. But also being mindful too. A lot of the young people today are easily influenced. So a lot of what he might simply be mimicking what the behavior of other atheists or doubters or whatever, and so he's sort of saying, "Oh, that's the approach to take." He might just need, even though another example of how to approach it, other than aggressively, other than with a
Right.
level of arrogance and aggression. Kids easily influenced.
yeah,
Yeah. Well, I appreciate your life, man. I'm gonna step down. Now I'm here taking care of my mom. Honor your mother and father that your days may be long. All right.
right on. Thanks,
Yeah.
man. Yeah, it's always good to like. I mean, we always could do better, but the realities of life sometimes we're only human. But I try my best to be patient and respectful. And
What's up, dude?
what's up, bro?
Yeah, that was a bunch of nonsense, man. I don't see how you even put up with it, really.
So, did you repent and become a Christian?
Why would I repent if I never repented first, bro?
Whoa.
Was that like? That's a joke, man. So can you tell me what this God is that exists? Can you tell me what it is?
Were you ever a Christian? How's that funny?
Oh, bro. Oh, no, I'm not that dumb. So can you tell me what this God is, bro?
What this God is? I mean, aren't you
Yeah, can you tell me what it is?
never heard of Jesus?
Is that a person?
It's a person.
Are you saying a person is a God? Is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm saying.
Is that what you're telling me? A person is a God?
Yep.
So if a person is a God, then God has to exist because God are people? Is that what you're saying, bro? Is that really your argument?
No, God's just.
Then so you're telling me God is a person, but God must exist in order for people to know things. Like I'm trying to figure it out, bro. What is God? I keep asking. Everybody has a different answer. It's weird.
God is the presupposition that makes that true.
God is a what?
He's the presupposition that makes a fact true. So what do you think?
He's a presupposition that makes a fact true. What you think facts are presupposed?
Well, God's the truth. Yeah.
So you think facts are presupposed? Are you for real, bro?
Not sure.
Come on. Yeah, you just said he's the presupposition that makes facts true,
Right.
and you're saying facts are presupposed.
Well, facts are only true if.
Okay, facts are what?
Something would have to make a fact true, right? It can't just be true.
What? They're not presupposed? You just told me they're presupposed, bro.
How else would a fact be true? What would make a fact true?
That it is just repeatedly the same thing over and over and over?
What?
Is that what you're saying by true? That it's something that you verified over and over and over to be the thing that happened? Is that what you're saying?
In my system, when I say something's true, truth is a person. Truth is Jesus. Jesus is the truth.
So what? So you're saying people don't lie? Is that what you're saying? People are gods and gods don't lie, and I'm trying to figure it out. People are true, but people are gods.
Bro, this is not that complicated. So Jesus is a person.
It seems very complicated. I'm trying to figure it out, bro.
Okay. Well, this is Jesus.
Yeah. Right. I asked you what is God, and you told me Jesus, which is a dude. So you're like, okay. So I normally don't grant the dude, but I'll give you the dude. Let's say God is the dude. So gods are dudes. Like
in my system, God is the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, which is three persons.
I don't know what that means. I'm trying to fit this is why it's so complicated to figure out what a God is, because nobody knows what it is, but you're saying it must exist. It's really weird, bro. I'm trying to figure out what this God is.
I don't know why it's so hard for you.
I don't either. It's weird.
Why is it weird?
It's like the more I try, the more bullshit people come up with. It's weird.
Why can't you figure it out? What's so complicated?
I'm trying to figure it out, bro. Yeah. Like I keep asking people, and people keep like hating on me and telling me these nasty things and screaming at me even. It's weird, but I keep trying to figure it out.
What do you think God is?
I don't know. That's why I'm asking you. You're the one with a God who says it exists. I'm trying to figure it out. Yeah, I think it's a bunch of bullshit people keep saying. I think people lie and say they have these things they don't actually fucking have. That's what I think. but nobody cares about what I think. I'm trying to figure out what a God is. You know what I mean? I keep trying, but nobody can explain it well enough, I guess.
You know what a mind is?
I think I have the concept of a mind down. I'm pretty sure I have the concept of a mind. Yeah, I think I have that one.
You know what it means to be eternal? You know what it means to be eternal?
No, I think that's make believe.
Okay. Well, I guess I can't.
So I know minds require things like physical things, like a brain, right? So without a brain, are you telling me God is a brain?
You don't know what it means to be eternal, right? Like when I say eternal, that's
I know what the word eternal means, but I don't know what it is to be eternal. Like I got the concept of eternal, right? Like I got the concept, but the concept seems imaginary.
You understand what eternal means?
I understand what eternal means, yeah. I have the concept of it.
God is an eternal mind. There you go.
So God has a brain?
No, he's an eternal mind.
What? Yeah, I don't know what you mean. How is he a mind without a brain, for one? Do brains, like, do minds require brains?
No.
I'm pretty sure if you think, then you must have a brain to process the thoughts, or you don't process thoughts. Like, because you have to remember things in order to continue to think of other things, right? Like, so I'm trying to figure that. So you're telling me God is a brain, bro? God is a brain that lasts forever. Is that what you're telling me?
An eternal mind.
Oh my gosh. A mind requires a brain. Okay. I don't know if you know this.
How do you know that?
Because we see when brains stop working, the minds stop working. Do you not notice that when you see brains quit working?
Do you know that a tree
have you ever seen anybody with a brain that just quit working? Like that the brain just stopped? Like, do you know all the muscles inside of that body, like, quit holding all the poop it holds in?
Do you know that a tree doesn't have a mind?
Does a tree have a mind?
I don't know.
Have you ever seen a tree? Have you ever seen a tree think?
I don't know. How could you know?
Do you care if a tree has a mind?
Well, you're saying
I don't think you do. So why do you care? Why would you care if? Like, it's so weird, bro. You're like trees. You think trees have minds? Are you trying to compare people to trees?
You said a brain has a mind. It's necessary.
No. I say the mind is necessary
Yeah.
from the brain. Like the brain, without a brain, there is no mind.
Yeah, but how do you know that?
Because I've seen brains that had minds and then no longer have the mind because the brain quit working.
How could you determine the tree doesn't have a mind?
Do you care if a tree has a mind? Are you comparing people to trees again?
There's lots of living things.
Are you for real, bro? Like, are you comparing like people to trees? Really?
Well, how would you know?
How do you know that the brain doesn't? How do you know that the tree doesn't or does? Who cares? Why would you care?
Well,
Do you ever wonder what a tree thinks about? Is that your thing? You're like, I think what a tree thinks. Why are we talking about trees anyway? We're talking about God, right?
there's a necessary.
We're trying to figure out what this God is, man. I don't care what trees think. Do you?
Well, you made a claim that there's a necessary relationship between the brain and the mind. You're
Well,
saying, how
can
do
you?
know that?
Because I've linked minds with brains. I've seen minds no longer be a mind because the brain quit working.
But isn't it?
Have you not seen this?
Isn't it logically possible a tree could have a mind?
Is it logically possible? Logic is a human concept, and I don't think trees use human concepts. Do you think trees use human concepts?
Is there? What's the P and not P for a tree having a mind?
I'm not sure. I don't care if trees have minds. Do you care if trees have minds?
A tree had a mind.
I'm not trying to figure out if trees have minds. I'm trying to figure out what this fucking God thing is, man.
If a tree could have
Why
a
are we-
mind, then
Could it? Who cares? What?
a mind could exist without a brain. So how do you know that a tree doesn't have a mind?
Who cares if it has a mind or not? I'm not trying to figure out if a tree has a mind. Are you trying to figure out if trees have minds?
You said God has to have a brain to have a mind, but I don't see how you would know.
No, you said God exists. I'm trying to figure out what this God is. You said it has a mind.
And then you said brain.
Right.
The brain.
So how does it, I asked, how does it have a mind without a brain?
How does it have a mind without a brain? Because a mind.
Yeah, and then now you're trying to link minds to brain, and
The
so
mind isn't. There's no reason to think that a mind is contingent or it needs a brain.
no, you've never seen a brain that had a mind in it, and then when the brain quit working, the mind was no longer there.
How do you know that?
Because you can talk to them when they're working, and then when it no longer works, you can no longer talk to them. Correct?
Yeah, but
Okay.
there's
So what's a yeah but?
well, you can't talk to someone who's asleep, but their brain is conscious.
You can talk to people who sleep.
No, but they would if they're unconscious and they're dreaming.
If they're unconscious, they're probably not going to be able to speak. But if they're dreaming, they can speak. Have you not talked to anybody laying next to you while they were dreaming?
Uh-huh.
Okay. Did they talk back to you?
Oh my god. Someone like not this guy.
Come on, Pre-Sub. What's going on, man?
This is so bad.
It is. It really is. Now you have 27 people in here listening to how bad this is.
It's awful.
Is it? Is it because your argument's not working? Because you don't really have one?
You have to
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out what this God is. You say this God exists. I'm trying to figure out what it is. You told me that it's some kind of eternal mind. I don't. How do you know it's an eternal mind?
It's the P and not P for having a mind without a brain.
Yeah. What's the P and not P for having a mind at all.
Do you have a mind?
I'd like to think I do.
Really? Do you want to try using it right now?
I can try.
Okay.
Can you tell me what this God is?
An eternal mind.
What is an eternal mind?
This is so bad. Oh my God, why do people do that? If I just ask them to define things over and over, then they can't make an argument. Oh my God. It's like so, like, ugh. So bad. Like, why do that? It's just like obnoxious. Oh well, that's what you want to do. I mean, this is atheism. So let's talk about pragmatism, right? Because of the failure of foundationalism and because of the success of science, science has become the contemporary paradigm for epistemology. Utility has become the modern day criterion for truth. If it works, it's true. This pragmatic theory of truth, first advocated by Pierce, James, and Dewey, looks to a proposition for its cash value. This theory has been advocated most effectively in our time by some of the most important philosophers of our day, such as Sellers, Popper, Rorty, and Quine. Rorty says, for the pragmatist, true sentences are not true because they correspond to reality. And so there's no need to worry what sort of reality, if any, a given sentence corresponds to. No need to worry about what makes it true. He drops the notion of truth as correspondence with reality altogether and says that modern science does not enable us to cope because it corresponds. It just plain enables us to cope. This approach to truth should hardly need a rebuttal. The pragmatic project is to identify what language games and forms of life will best enable a given agent to achieve his desired goal. This might be an interesting project in itself, but its pursuit demonstrates the complete failure of autonomous man, secular man, to make any objective sense out of life, reason, and experience in any type of normative, descriptive sense. Man has not won the game of knowledge. He finally realized he could not win and found a new game to play. So he's saying here that pragmatism is like giving up. But man cannot win the game of pragmatism either, for even though he is not playing the game of knowledge, he will still need to provide an unattainable criterion for determining who are the proper agents and what is the proper goal. Only when these choices have been made can man invoke his science and ingenuity to decide what is the most efficient means for the chosen agent to achieve his chosen goal. As Dr. Bahnsen summarizes, we must press on and ask critically about the rationality or the arbitrariness of our choice of goals. We can grant the superiority of science problem-solving tools only after we are convinced science is dealing with the right problems in the first place. So then, why should our goal be that of coping with the environment instead of the alternative? Perhaps more weighty aims of mystical union with nature, interpersonal rapport, appreciation of beauty, and on and on. What justifies the particular goal chosen by the empirical scientist? Perhaps that goal is simply arbitrary, consequently reintroducing relativism, and skepticism into science. Now, to avoid arbitrariness and question begging, an external justification of the chosen goal becomes necessary, forcing the pragmatist to go outside his epistemology and to naturalize his procedures. This justification will be descriptive in nature, claiming that a given agent, the scientist, succeeds in getting to his given goal if he adheres to a given method. Now, when the agent is an individual and the goal is dictated by self-interest, epistemology is naturalized or reduced to psychology, which is what you find in Quine's article, Epistemology Naturalized, and in Piaget's Genetic Epistemology. If the agent is the species and the goal of science is the survival of the species, epistemology is naturalized into biology, which is what you find in Popper's Objective Knowledge and Stephen Tolman's Human Understanding. If you take the agent as a social class, the goal as its domination over other classes, epistemology reduces to sociology or history, as in Marxist epistemology, as you also find in the sociology of knowledge, when the agent is seen as culture with the goal of serving its conventional aims. Epistemology is reduced to anthropology, which is what you find in Winch's book, The Idea of a Social Science. The trouble with all of these naturalizing epistemologies, which reduce to one branch of descriptive science or another, is that they answer the request for a justification of science by simply skirting it. Science gives neither a rational nor pragmatic justification for its practice. In fact, Everett points out in his analysis of Quine's Epistemology Naturalized that since Quine is not concerned about the existence of the external world, but only about the psychological processes that exist between the data a person receives, the input, and their view of the world, the output, that is produced as a result of that data, naturalized epistemology is not dealing with the same question as traditional epistemology, and therefore may not really be epistemology at all. So in conclusion, Jeff, salvation, I mean, we're saved by the grace of God, so it's an unmerited reward. And then when God saves you, He expects you to change on the inside, and that change is going to be just, there'll be fruits of your change. A dictionary definition? I don't care about that. Why does that matter? So the epistemological dead-end view of history is not just the speculations of a committed Christian. Richard Rorty similarly summarizes history. He says that once upon a time we felt a need to worship something which lay beyond the visible world. Beginning in the 17th century, we tried to substitute a love of the truth for a love of God, treating the world described by science as a quasi-divinity. Beginning at the end of the 18th century, we tried to substitute a love of ourselves for a love of scientific truth. He goes on to suggest that we try to get to the point where we no longer worship anything, where we treat nothing as a quasi-divinity, where we treat everything, our language, our conscience, our community, as a product of time and chance. Cornelius Van Til points out this world of chance that Rorty endorses is at the heart of the non-theistic worldview. This world of chance is in stark antithetical contrast to the intentional worldview of Christianity. It is in the intentional world alone that the world, man, and reason are connected. It is in this intentional world alone that truth can exist and in which any theory of knowledge must take place. The very notion of philosophy and science, as descriptive endeavors, presupposes that man and the various objects of the world are all united in a relationship, essentially as outlined in the story of the Bible. It presupposes that behind everything is a unifying entity. Thus, traditional philosophy and science are theistic concepts. Rorty himself acknowledged the point. He says, the very idea of the world, or the self as an intrinsic nature, one which the physicist or the poet may have glimpsed, is remnant of the idea that the world is a divine creation, the work of someone who had something in mind, who himself spoke some language in which he described his own project. Only if we have some such picture in mind, some picture of the universe as either itself a person or as created by a person, can we make sense of the idea that the world has an intrinsic nature. What is Rorty saying here? He is saying that the idea of truth as a description of the nature of the world is meaningful only if the world has an intrinsic nature. But the world does not have an intrinsic nature if everything is what it is by chance. In a chance world, the properties of a thing are not connected or united to one another. It is infinitely improbable that any two entities will share the same property, or any two properties will share the same entity purely by chance. Only if an entity has in back of it something by which its possible states of existence are limited, is there a limit to its possible states of existence? Are unifying descriptions of a chance world or fictions? It is only if everything is where it is, not by chance, but by intention, that our unifying descriptions of the world can be true and meaningful. Rorty correctly sees that such an intentional world is the world that belongs to our story in the Bible. It is a world that came forth from the mind of a divine creator. This theistic story is the precondition not just for truth, knowledge, and the intelligibility of experience, but for metaphysics as well. Rorty has inadvertently given us here the transcendental argument for the existence of God and the truth of his revelation. Karl Popper gives a good explanation of the transcendental argument. He says, an argument which appeals to the fact that we possess knowledge or that we can learn from experience, and which concludes from this fact that knowledge or learning from experience must be possible, and further, that every theory which entails the impossibility of knowledge or of learning from experience must be false, may be called a transcendental argument. For example, we saw earlier that no direct argument can be given for logic, yet even if we cannot say what logic is, we are not willing to give it up. For to do so is to unravel the entire fabric of epistemology. And this is exactly why we believe in it, not because it is the conclusion of some inductive or deductive argument, but because it is foundational to inductive and deductive arguments. This is the strongest inference one can have. This is a transcendental inference. It is in this way we argue for God. What the history of epistemology teaches us is that man, without an epistemological jumpstart from God, without the revelation of God and the theistic world view expounded in it, man cannot know the nature of himself, logic, the world, universals, or how they are all or could be related. In short, he cannot attain a coherent theory of knowledge. Consequently, No beliefs can be justified, and no beliefs can attain to the level of knowledge. Therefore, because theistic revelation alone is the basis upon which knowledge is possible, it is the precondition for knowledge and is transcendentally and necessarily true. Secular man can use reason and his senses while denying belief in God, and can thereby do math, science, and manipulate the world around him. But he can give no account of reason and senses apart from God. Therefore, just as reason presupposes the actuality of logic, whether or not one believes in it, so reason presupposes the actuality of God and the truth of our first story, the story of the Bible, whether or not one believes in it. This being the case, all arguments are arguments for the existence of God, and no argument against the existence of God can be made. For in the final analysis, an argument against the existence of God is like an argument against arguments. It is when one realizes that it is not possible to give an secular account of knowledge at all, he comes to a crossroads. He must either maintain his epistemological secularity and surrender to the most radical skepticism, or he must surrender his secularity to the revelation of God, and not as the conclusion that has met his standards, but as the foundation and precondition of the epistemological criterion itself. Without a revelation from God, we cannot know that all the objects of the world are rationally related and that our attributes are appropriate to know it. Okay, that's an important sentence there. Without a revelation from God, we humans cannot know that all the objects of the world are rationally related and that our attributes are appropriate to know it. You may recognize this as a simple disjunctive syllogism, given that knowledge is possible at all. Epistemology with God and secular epistemology are antithetical systems, and one must be true, one must be false. If one is false, then the other is true. We have seen that, in principle, secular epistemology is not possible. On this premise, all facts and all experience are unintelligible. Therefore, we must conclude that the precondition to knowledge, to science, and to philosophy is the existence of God and the veracity of his revelation. One's web of beliefs, his world view, determines the meaning that he applies to an experience. It is the foundation and the criterion by which he determines truth. But only if man's mind and senses are appropriate for discovering the world, and only if his interpretive scheme, his worldview, is correct, can he attain to truth. But this is possible only if he is intended for this world, and only if his worldview comes from someone who is in a position to know. All other worldviews amount to nothing more than wild guesses and vain imaginings. God is proven not as the conclusion of rational or empirical theistic arguments, but as the very ground of argument itself. It is with the surrender to God's view of himself, the world, and ourselves that one can articulate a coherent theory of knowledge. God's revelation is not validated by some secular epistemology. Rather, our epistemology is validated by the revelation of God and the story contained in that revelation. God's revelation is self-authenticating because by it, everything else is authenticated. I won't debate in good faith. Yeah, right. Look there, I just proved God. There you go. And then they just say I'm yapping. Y'all are hopeless.